So our next presenters, Dr. Laura Girard and David D'Onofrio, come to us from FHWA. Laura Girard is a senior hydraulic engineer with the Federal Highway Administration's Resource Center. Ms. Girard has spent the last 2 decades of her career wading in, measuring, modeling, and studying riverine systems. She provides technical support to bridge owners on resilience-related hydraulic design. As a hydraulic engineer for FHWA, she has designed hydraulic structures in some of our country's most sensitive riverine systems, including national parks, national forests, and wildlife refuges. Her experience includes work as a researcher on 3 NCHRP hydraulic studies, an author of the corresponding reports, co-author of the Hydraulic Engineering Circular 23, and instructor for 7 National Highway Institute courses on scour, resilience, stream dynamics, and modeling of river encroachments. Our other presenter for this presentation is David D'Onofrio. He's an environmental protection specialist with the Federal Highway Administration's Office of Natural Environment. David started his federal career in FHWA's Resource Center in 2019 as an air quality specialist. His work is focused on issues related to transportation, climate resiliency, and air quality. Before joining FHWA, David worked for more than 9 years as an air quality and climate change planner at the Atlanta Regional Commission. David holds an undergraduate degree in Earth and Atmospheric Science and a dual master's degree in Urban Planning and Atmospheric Science from Georgia Tech.
All right, thanks, Jen. If it was that easy, I would have gotten a PhD a long time ago. All right, give me just a minute to do this. So when David and I were putting this together, however many months ago, we were really worried about those dinosaurs that Joe was mentioning, and we weren't sure the information about Protect was even going to be available. So we built in, being professionals in adaptation and resilience, we added a lot of extra words to this presentation thinking we might not be able to talk about Protect. But we're in a great position. The information about Protect came out just maybe 2 weeks ago, not quite 2 weeks maybe. So that's going to be the bulk of this. I'm going to do a little bit of introduction to resilience, and then David is really going to tell you what you want to hear about the Protect program. Okay, so why are we here? Why are we here? Well, Joe did a really good job of kind of really setting us up for this. He gave us a total softball, but let's talk about it. In 2021, we had over $25 billion weather and climate-related disasters. 25 over $1 billion. From 1980 to 2021, the average billion-dollar climate disasters was 5. And we had over 25 in 2021. From 2017 to 2021, the average was 17.5. So these severe events are increasing. In 2021, 688 people lost their lives in just these 25 events alone. And these are only the ones that are over $1 billion. This is 7 wildfires, countless storms in the Midwest, 2 massive hail events from Texas to the Ohio Valley, 4 different hurricane events, tornadoes, snowstorms in the southern U.S. These are huge events, and they're increasing, so we want to be able to prepare for that. And we do that in 2 different ways. We mitigate, right? So we plan for how can we help prevent further climatic change. And we do that by reducing greenhouse gases. And then how do we prepare for it? Change is here, and more change is coming. And we do that by adapting. And we have systematic processes to understand how we need to adapt. That's through vulnerability assessments, through incorporating resilience into our designs, and planning for emergency management. All right, so what are we talking about here? Let's just get down to the basics. Federal Highways has defined what is resilience. It is the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and to adapt to changing conditions and withstand, respond to, and recover rapidly from disruptions. It doesn't say anything about climate in here. This is about knowing what do we have to prepare for today and in the future, and how do we adapt to that, how do we think about it, and how do we recover rapidly from it? How does it keep us from being hamstrung? And then adaptation. This is where the changing environment comes in. It's adjustment in both our natural systems and our human systems in anticipation to that changing environment. And then to effectively use the beneficial opportunities that are already there for us and reduce those negative impacts. So there's 5 key pieces of resilient transportation. We need to protect our assets, right? What's happening and how do we protect our assets? How do we anticipate for what's coming in the future? Not just what's here today, but for what's coming in the future. And that's what the Protect Grant program is about. We prevent the risks of failure that we can identify today and that we can anticipate in the future without significant disruptions to our system. And then we want to be able to respond and recover rapidly. So why are we considering this? Because the climate variables are changing. It's getting hotter, sea level is rising, we're seeing increased precipitation in places. In other places where the precipitation may not be changing, wildfire might be inducing increases in precipitation. We're seeing increased storm surges, increased tsunamis, and heavy downpours. When we are building our major assets today, we have to plan not just for what we know is going to happen based on our historical record, but we have to plan for what we can predict in the future. And that looks at that non-stationarity that Brian Bledsoe was talking about yesterday. So what is vulnerability? Well, it's exposure. What's happening specifically at the location of your asset, right? So what are the climate variables that we can anticipate to be changing at your location? What is the sensitivity of that asset to those variables? What is the probability or the risk that we may have climate variables that will put that asset at risk? And then adaptive capacity is the ability of that particular asset to, shift and jag. How can it respond to changing climatic variables? So we're on the 3rd edition of our vulnerability and adaptation framework. This is on our website. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. We would have if we didn't have the Protect program to talk about. But this is on our website. We're on the 3rd edition. And it lays out a systematic, detailed, and in-depth process for looking at a system-wide vulnerability assessments. So just to let you know that's out there. The link on the bottom is a really great resource, not just for this particular document, but a number of sustainability and resilient resources. And then I just want to make one final point. This happens across the board, not just in the planning process, but it starts in planning. It's incorporated into our engineering design at the early stages, not at the later stages. And then it's also is something that needs to be incorporated into our operations and maintenance. How do we respond to the small maintenance issues and these very large emergency issues as well? So integrating climate considerations into your project development process starts with the planning and scoping. That's the easiest place. That's the most obvious place to incorporate these changing climatic variables into your process. But it also needs to be done early at the preliminary design and engineering phase and environmental analysis. It is very, very challenging to incorporate resilience, adaptation to climatic variables in the later stages of your process. So just keep that in mind. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David for the money stuff.
Good morning, everyone. So I feel a little bit like a wolf in sheep's clothing here. I am a planner, not an engineer. This is my first NHEC conference. And I've heard lots of people come from all over the country. I overheard some people from Alaska talking the other day. I was talking with some folks from Colorado. I think I win the award for coming literally the furthest distance. My condo is across the street. So I literally, this was just like a telework day. I woke up at 7:45, went to the shower, rolled over to my computer, and then walked across the street. So super simple for me. If you run into me over the next few days in the conference and you want to know where to go eat, what to do, feel free, use me as a resource. I'm a Southerner. We have to be hospitable. It's in our blood. Not like the Minnesota nice type of nice, but different sarcastic kind of nice down here that I'm sure you guys are all going to get the hang of. So, Laura did a great job teeing this off, And she got to talk about all the exciting slides with the pictures and like the illustrations and like the dire warnings. And I get to be like the bureaucrat that stands up here and shows you like the technical information about the Protect program, which literally came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we haven't had a chance to like jazz this up and make it super exciting yet. I will do my best, but bear with me. I'm sure you're interested in the topic overall. So when we're talking about key methods to improve resilience, really there's a few things that we focus on and that Protect will allow you guys to start spending money on. So things to look at management and maintenance of your transportation system, increasing the redundancy of the system, making sure there are adequate parallel routes, especially when it comes to evacuation situations, protecting the infrastructure we have, whether that's hardening it through physical changes to the infrastructure, or if it's implementing nature-based solutions to ensure a protection of the infrastructure. Accommodating, so making modifications of designs of the infrastructure to deal with the stresses of climate change or other natural systems. Relocating infrastructure, so that could be taking a road and moving it further away from a riverbed. It could be, and it goes as far as retreat. Like in some communities, it may not be viable to continue to maintain infrastructure, and you may want to phase it out and consider not rebuilding it anymore at some point. So like all of these are generally the types of programs that we focus on when it comes to transportation resilience, and these are all things that Protect can in some way offer funding for. Okay, so the Protect program, there's 2 parts to it. There's a formula part and a discretionary part. The formula part guidance just came out a couple weeks ago. So I think Joe had mentioned this yesterday, this is one of those ones with a great acronym. There's definitely someone in the White House or in Congress that just works up these acronyms and then decides to name the program afterwards. But it's great. Literally, it's about protecting infrastructure. And it was a part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was signed last November. But this was one of the programs where we weren't allowed to work in federal highways until March. So that's why this is all dragging a little bit, and why we've been a little late in getting out guidance. We weren't able to work on this until a few months ago. So there are 4 key areas and project types that are eligible for Protect funding. And these are, I've got a little cheat sheet here that goes into this in a little bit more detail, so sorry if I'm gonna read off this a little bit for you. But the first thing is planning. So activities like developing resilience improvement plans, which we'll talk about. There's some specific words in Bill about what a resilience improvement plan is. Resilience planning in general, pre-design, design, development of data tools to simulate transportation disruption scenarios. So like some of the things I've heard about even in this conference so far could be eligible for Protect funding under like a planning component of that. Including preparing vulnerability assessments. These are a really big thing that the planning community is pushing, these region-wide, statewide vulnerability assessments. Increasing technical capacity to facilitate the ability of the state to assess the vulnerabilities of its system, and other things and tools and planning products that look at future conditions or evacuation planning. So all of those types of projects are generally eligible under the Protect program. We also have resilience improvements, and this is maybe like the more obvious things. Projects to make existing surface transportation more resilient, such as improving drainage, upgrades to meet or exceed design standards, relocating roads, or elevating bridges. We also have community resilience and evacuation route activities, so things that strengthen and protect evacuation routes that are essential for providing and supporting evacuations caused by emergency events, including resilience improvements if they improve evacuation routes, and projects to ensure the ability of evacuation routes to provide safe passage during adverse effects. And then last we have coastal infrastructure. So projects that strengthen, stabilize, harden, elevate, relocate, or enhance the resilience of highway and non-rail infrastructure, including bridges, roads, pedestrian walkways, bike lanes, and associated infrastructure such as culverts and tide gates. So I know that's a mouthful and a lot of information there. All of this stuff is very clearly spelled out in the implementation guidance on our website. But there's a really wide variety of things you can use Protect money for. Like this is the 10-second version of everything I just said. You can plan with it, including building tools. You can use it to enhance your infrastructure to protect it from extreme weather events. And that includes things like culverts, bridges, like all the drainage basins, like everything you guys like to play with in the water world. So, which was a horrible movie. I don't know why. I mean, I kind of dig the idea of it, but it was an awful movie. Okay, so Protect Formula Program. So here, this slide shows you how much money we have that's allocated to the states in the formula program by year. So it's a fairly sizable chunk of money. Eligible planning activities are a minimum of 2% of the apportioned funds. Construction of new capacity, maximum of 40%. So that goes towards like you want to build parallel routes. You can identify parallel routes as a necessary component of a resilience strategy, but you can only spend about up to 40% of the funds for building brand new capacity. So most of the money is focused not on new capacity generation. And then project development, that's a maximum of 10%. Okay, so we talked a little bit about resilience improvement plans. So within bill, these are specifically called out as an item that can be prepared. So they're voluntary. They can be prepared by state DOTs or MPOs, so metropolitan planning organizations. They have to demonstrate a systematic approach to resilience, so they have to be more holistic and think about the entire system, not just any one individual asset. They cover all elements of PROTECT, like the planning, resilience improvements, evacuation routes, coastal infrastructure. So there's a very broad perspective that they're supposed to be taking. They must be risk-based assessments of vulnerabilities to current and future weather events and natural disasters. And they can be funded using PROTECT money. So states and MPOs can make these plans and use the PROTECT money to pay for them. Why might you want to build one? Okay, so or prepare a plan. In general, this is still being worked out a little bit, so take this with a grain of salt. This is that dinosaur again, which I really love, and I'm probably going to steal for some future presentations. But the general mix of funds for a project is 80%, up to 80% federal, 20% state. And depends a little bit on the state you live in. Some of the western states get a bigger match. So that's some of the semantics that are being worked out. But if you prepare a resilience improvement plan, you can get up to an extra 7% federal share on projects in your state. So if you're a state DOT and you prepare one of these resilience improvement plans and it meets the requirements of them, instead of the 80-20 split, it can be an 87-13 split. And then if you can get an extra 3% if your resilience plan, your resilience improvement plan is incorporated into the Metropolitan Transportation Plan or the statewide long-range transportation plan. So you can get up to a 90-10 match on PROTECT money, federal, local, if you prepare these plans. So that's kind of the financial incentive for a state DOT to go through the process of looking at like a holistic approach to their resilience program. So that's the formula program. Guidance is out. Everyone should be chugging along on that program now. There's also the grant or the discretionary program, which is more of a grant-based program. The guidance isn't out on this yet. My colleagues are working on it. I think they're hoping to get it out sometime in the next few months. But unlike the formula program, this is going to be a series of grants, $1.4 billion for the next 5 years. And it has a wider range of eligible entities, whereas the formula program goes straight to state DOTs, and the state DOTs figure out how to use the money. States, MPOs, local governments, Indian tribes, special purpose districts, like a lot of other organizations can apply for these grants and be awarded them. So in these situations, having those resilience improvement plans at a smaller level than the state can be really valuable. If you recall a minute ago, I mentioned, these for the formula program, if the state has a resilience improvement program, it adjusts these matches for their funds. So when you start to get down to this discretionary program, it really incentivizes MPOs to prepare these plans too. Because if an MPO applies for money and they have a resilience improvement plan, or any of the local governments within the MPO's area, they'll look to the MPO's performance plan to get those similar match benefits. Does that check out with everyone? Okay. All right, so that's really all I wanted to share on the PROTECT program. There are a variety of resilience resources available. This is the same link that Laura showed a little while ago on the Environment Sustainability Resilience page on our Federal Highways website. Documents that relate a lot to like preparing vulnerability assessments, a series of pilots that we've been working on over the past like 12 or 15 years from across the country, looking at how to incorporate resilience in different aspects of their work from a planning and design and engineering perspective. And then like all the HEC manuals and nature-based solutions, these are all available on our website. This is the disclaimer without the dinosaur, which is far less fun than the one with the dinosaur. And here's Laura and my contact information if you have any questions or want to reach out to us in the future. But I think we have time for questions now. Yes? So I'll add while you guys are thinking, like, Laura's an engineer, I'm a planner. We find it really interesting to talk to each other about these sorts of things because often there is a lot of information lost in translation. When planners go about a process to develop their plans, they're not always thinking about like the engineering aspects of things. And when engineers get a project on their desk, they're not always thinking about all the steps that went in the planning process to decide that that's where a project needs to be done. So I think that there's probably a need for more communication between the two groups, and especially when it comes to these sorts of resilience improvements. So if planners go through a process to identify an area that is vulnerable, hopefully engineers help them get to that conclusion. But if not, if you're just receiving on your desk as like a, like engineer for state DOT or a private sector, you're just receiving like this plan that has all this extra information about like why, the bridge should be higher or what, all this other stuff. Like it's really important that you understand like how, the decisions were made to get to that point. And maybe a lot of you already work in states where that's true, but maybe some of you don't. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do these resilience plans have to be submitted and approved, or do we just point at them and say, hey, we have one?
I don't remember if there's an exact approval process. I don't know. Elizabeth, looking for Elizabeth if she's in. There you go. I don't think so.
Not yet.
Not yet, yeah. You just have to have one, I think, on file in some capacity. And it has to meet the basic requirements that the shalls within the law.
Yeah, there are some definitions out there for what's included in the
Yeah.
resilience.
I think we're also working on getting some more information before too long about what a successful resilience improvement plan looks like and how to use that information to help states prepare plans themselves. Yeah.
So you talked about going from planning to engineering, and I'm curious if there's been any discussion anywhere that you've seen or heard about going to operations as a part of resilience planning, because maintaining our assets is arguably one of the best investments we could ever make. And as an asset manager, I have yet to see anything come from the federal level to support actually inspecting. I mean, you talked a little bit about some of the planning and capacity information, but going that extra step from potentially even knowing what your assets are and what condition they're in to just being able to send your normal maintenance forces out there to clean them, to clean the pipes, to dredge the ponds that need it and things of that nature. Has there been any discussions that you guys have heard in these type of programs for that type of support?
I see Elizabeth leaning forward to talk about it. Did you want to jump in on that?
There are a few documents on the Federal Highway website for resilience and operations. But there hasn't been any, I don't believe there's been anything done in the last couple of years. It's a big topic within the TRE Committee on Operations. And I think what you're getting at is kind of an asset management issue. That was that circle that was on the bottom of Laura's slide going from maintenance back.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's something that I think asset management would really discuss. And there is more resilience going into asset management right now as well. So I think that's common.
There is a newly released document on asset management and resilience on that webpage that we talked about, and then at least two, maybe more of the pilot projects look at asset management as examples. And by all means, reach out to David and I with the same question on email so we can send you exactly instead of waving our hands about the giant web at you.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That's better.
Do you have a vision for what the application process might look like?
For the discretionary program?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're far enough there yet. Yeah. Any last questions? Yeah.
Well, just to follow up, what do we think the timeline will be as far as when DOTs can actually start formally applying through this process?
For the discretionary program?
Well, through
The formula program is open.
Yes.
okay, that's okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
as soon as the guidance was released, the funds are available and able to be used. And one other thing I didn't point out specifically, but the Protect program is aiming to pay for the incremental costs of these improvements. So it's not the entire cost of a project. Like if you're building a new bridge and you go through your normal process would say this bridge should cost $5 million. Then you do a vulnerability assessment, which can be paid for through Protect, and a lot of these other design components that can be paid for in the studying and planning process says you need to add $1 million to harden it up to what you expect in 20 years, then that $1 million extra enhancements to the projects are what you would actually use protect money on, not the $6 million total project, if that makes sense. So the idea is that this helps to cover those incremental costs, which DOTs often have had a lot of trouble justifying, and then it'll extend the dollars further because you're only paying for incremental costs on a variety of projects across a state instead of, you know, building one $100 million project and then just saying, oh, well, we're going to add $10 million of, you know, resilience things, and we're going to pay for the whole $110 million projects with protect money. So, Elizabeth, yeah.